Welcome back to Giant Freakin' Robot. If I told you there's an epic science fiction fantasy film from the 80s with a bigger budget than Star Wars, and you've probably never heard of it, you might not believe me. But that's exactly what you get with 1983's $30 million budgeted, once cult classic, but now mostly forgotten, Krull. What sets Krull apart from the original Star Wars trilogy is that against its $30 million budget, it only earned back $16.9 million at the box office. Meanwhile, Star Wars, of course, went on to become a billion-dollar franchise. Krull was a box office bomb when it was released, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Despite an arcade game, a board game, an Atari 2600 cartridge, and various other merchandise, Columbia Pictures couldn't generate any hype for the film. Krull is 100% a Star Wars ripoff. Any movie that opens with a credits scene like this, and there were a lot of them at the time, has to be considered one. However, in the sea of derivative sci-fi fantasy movies that flooded Hollywood in the late 70s and early 80s, Krull is one of the few worth a fig. The movie's name comes from the planet where the story is set, and the world of Krull is as detailed and fully realized as Star Wars. Much like Star Wars, Krull just kind of tells you stuff, and expects you to figure everything out from context clues. The movie never explains exactly what the Beast's deal is, in the same way A New Hope reveals jack squat about Darth Vader. All we really need to know as viewers is that the Beast is evil. The rest is incidental. Krull's hero and primary protagonist is Colwyn, played by Ken Marshall. Years later, Marshall would earn himself a pivotal spot in the Star Trek franchise as Michael Eddington. Eddington was a Star Trek Deep Space Nine character who begins as a recurring pain-in-the-butt hero. Over the course of a couple of seasons, Eddington morphs into one of the Star Trek franchise's most iconic villains.
As long as you're making a list, why don't you add this?
But in Krull he still has his hair, so he's playing a young prince named Colwyn. Colwyn is set to marry Princess Lissa for reasons both romantic and logistical. By joining forces and uniting their respective kingdoms, they can use their collective powers to take out the film's primary antagonist, the Beast. However, the Beast sends in his army of slayers, who resemble medieval stormtroopers, to kidnap Princess Lissa and kill Colwyn's father before they finish the ceremony. Devastated by what he thinks is the end of his kingdom, Colwyn seeks help from Ynir, played by Freddie Jones. Ynir is an elder with a conveniently infinite amount of wisdom about a number of very important prophecies that make absolutely no sense.
There are kingly virtues other than bravery. Courtesy is one of them.
He'll be your Obi-Wan for this adventure. From him, Colwyn learns about the glaive, a weapon which looks like a 5-pointed fidget spinner with retractable blades. The Chosen One is the only person who can safely procure the glaive, and Colwyn is the chosen one in the world building that Krull establishes. He proves this by dodging rocks. Eventually he dodges enough that he pulls the glaive out of some lava. Seeking revenge against the Beast, there is one more complication. The Beast's magical lair, the Black Fortress, disappears every day, only to reappear in a completely different location the following sunrise. Colwyn's adventure is eventually joined by a magician named Ergo the Magnificent, a Cyclops named Rel, who's aware of his own approaching mortality, and a band of 9 thieves and thugs with names like Torquil, Bardolph, Menno, Darrow, and Keegan. Keegan, by the way, is played by a very young Liam Neeson. With one common goal in mind, the Krull crew embarks on a treacherous quest to rescue Lissa and destroy the Beast's army. Krull isn't a complete Star Wars parallel by any stretch. For one thing, while the bad guys have blasters, the movie is more fantasy than sci-fi. The good guy characters use regular swords and ride horses, as opposed to laser swords and land speeders. Krull is also darker than Star Wars. In tone, it's a lot like the first half of Return of the Jedi. Sure, Krull received the same PG rating as Star Wars, but there's more disturbing imagery on display. This sequence with a giant crystalline spider still gives me the willies. And this scene where a changeling dies reverting halfway back to its original form is pretty disturbing stuff to show a small child. Krull's most interesting element is also the one least like anything from Star Wars. The glaive. The glaive is one of the coolest movie weapons ever created. It's an entirely impractical bladed pinwheel of death that comes back after it's thrown. The glaive is one of those weapons, like the razor boomerang in The Road Warrior, that wouldn't make much sense in real life but is perfect for a movie. While Krull may sound like your basic sci-fantasy plot, its cinematography is larger than life. The film's production value is through the roof.
And we want to feel that people can come and see something really beautiful.
Not only were 23 massive set pieces built for the production, but constant script rewrites required the set designers to alter the sets to match the new storylines on several occasions. That said, I can't wrap my head around why the quicksand scenes, which take up maybe 5 minutes of screen time, required 4 tons of shaved cork. And filming at one of the largest sound stages in the world, Pinewood's James Bond stage, to pull off.
10 sound stages at the Pinewood Studios in England are being used all at once, including the 007 stage where all the James Bond films were made. The largest stage in the world.
You do have to admire director Peter Yates' gumption if that's what he truly believed his movie needed. Couple Krull's set design with the fact that the film's score was composed by James Horner and performed in its entirety by the London Symphony Orchestra, and it's no wonder the production costs started mounting.
Lasers!
And all of that is without mentioning the lair of the crystal spider and the monolithic amount of special effects required to make those third-act sequences jump off the screen. Some of the establishing and wide-tracking shots are so awe-inspiring, I'm willing to forget that Colwyn doesn't know how to use the glaive and doesn't even attempt it until the last 10 minutes of the film.
Do not use it until you need it.
Krull is one of the most expensive disasters you'll ever see, especially when you consider that $30 million in 1984 is worth nearly $100 million today. Between the confusing storylines, you get a palpable amount of comic relief from David Battley,
Horrible! Horrible!
a whimsical film score that I hope was worth the amount of money it probably cost to produce, and Liam Neeson punching a horse in the face. Okay, maybe it's more of a slap, but the horse didn't seem to like it. Liam Neeson is crazy strong. Though few saw it in theaters, kids hyped up on Star Wars and craving more like it devoured Krull like a McDonald's Chicken McNugget when it was released on VHS in the 80s. These days, the movie is all but forgotten, and your average Marvel movie nerd has never heard of it, let alone seen it.
What?
The only Krull reference I've ever seen in other media is a Family Guy clip where a convenience store clerk tells Chris not to watch the movie.
Yeah, you don't need to see Krull.
It might seem that the only mark the film made on society was its badness. But Star Wars producer J.J. Abrams hasn't forgotten. He's been working on a Krull reboot, and while it's not certain if his take will ever actually get made, it's nice to know that Hollywood still has it on their radar. If you own one of those sword stores at the mall, it might be a good time to stock up on glaives. Until then, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more exciting Krull content. Who am I kidding? There's almost certainly not going to be any more Krull content. This has been Giant Freakin' Robot.